Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Eric Peyton, like Chris said, and I'm the Connections Coordinator here at Hope. Basically, that means I get to work with our network of small groups, what we call Hope Groups. And here at the West Des Moines campus, we have right around 500 small groups, so that keeps me plenty busy. And so I've been doing that here for, 8 or 9 years now. But like Chris said, and I guess many of you may know if we've met before, if you've seen me speak here, that I'm also a part-time golf pro that tends to be a lot of what I talk about in a lot of just everyday conversation. And I've just realized recently that I've now been a golf pro teaching the game for half my life. So for 17 years, I turned pro when I was 17, and I'm about 35 now, so about half my life I've been teaching the game, which is kind of crazy to think that I've been doing anything that long, because if I think back on my life at 17, in most meaningful ways, nothing's the same. But throughout all that time, golf has kind of been a constant for me. So if you think about your life half your life ago, think about all the things that were similar to what you're doing now. And there's probably not a whole lot of things, maybe there is. But for me, golf may be the only thing that's the same when I was 17 till now. But so I tend to look at things, and I talk about when I speak a lot, golf tends to come up a lot, and so I'm going to be talking about a little bit about golf today. If you're a golfer, you might get a little bit of insight into your own game, but if you're not a golfer, you don't like golf, I'm sorry. I'll try not to focus on it too much throughout the morning, but just this last week, in 1 Corinthians, as we've been reading through the whole Bible together, Pastor Ashley just this last Sunday spoke on 1 Corinthians 9, which Paul relates faith to sport. And obviously they weren't playing golf 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece, but he uses sport as an analogy for faith. And so I think in a lot of ways it's really valuable for us to look at faith in that sort of way. And so Chris has asked me to come talk here about the ways that God is working in my life, and so I said yes, only because I knew Perry's Coffee would be here, and that's about it. So, but Pastor Ashley was talking about that this weekend, and so I want to kind of continue on what she was discussing with faith and sport and how that interacts and the things that God's teaching me through sport currently, and so. As a golf instructor, and I'm sure in a lot of your professions as well, you're always trying to kind of evolve and trying to grow and trying to keep up with other people in your profession, but also make sure that you're doing your best and you're giving your clients and the people that you work with your best. And so recently, I had the opportunity to do an online seminar with a guy who does sports psychology and mental coaching for the game of golf, and so kind of bringing that into my instruction a little bit more, and it was just a really interesting look at something that we tend to ignore a little bit in the sport. We tend to think about the sport and how your body moves and how you have to change different things, physical things in your body in order to hit the ball better. And what he was discussing was that your mind matters just as much, and that's something that we don't often think about. I don't often think about it, and I know a lot of amateur golfers, the ones that I work with, aren't often thinking about what's happening in their brain during a round of golf. But it matters a lot. What happens in your brain affects what happens on the golf course and how you hit a golf ball and how you play. And I think we all know that and we realize that, but we often don't play like that's true. And so, let's see do I have a slide up here? Yeah, there we go. One of the game's greats. If you're a golfer, if you know the name Bobby Jones, one of the things he said is that golf is a game that's played on a 5-inch course, the distance between your ears. And all the professionals, they all know this, that the mental game matters perhaps even more than the physical game. When guys like Tiger Woods came on the scene, he was huge because he changed the game physically. He was physically better and superior to everyone out there, but as his career progressed and as people caught up, as he was no longer the best physically, his mental game we started to notice that more, that he was superior mentally as well as physically. And so as I was going through this seminar with this sports psychologist, the thing that stood out to me quite a bit is the way that fear and anger impact negatively our performance on the golf course. And you don't often think about, anger on the golf course. I think most of us if you've played golf, you understand. The saying is that golf is a 4-letter word, right? I think the angriest I've ever been is on a golf course, which is kind of embarrassing to say because it's ridiculous. We play golf for entertainment, for relaxation, and then we end up getting really angry or upset about that, and we kind of know maybe what our potential is, what we've seen ourselves do before, and so when we don't reach that potential, we get a little upset about it. But fear is one of those things that maybe we don't even think about on the golf course because we're not being chased by a lion. We're not in any physical danger unless you were out there playing this morning, in which case you're braver than I am because I'm not playing out in lightning. But there is an element of fear in golf as well, where we're afraid of not performing, whether it's embarrassment or whatever it is. But if you've stood over a shot before, you know that there can be this little bit of fear inside you for whatever reason. And those sorts of things, the fear and the anger, those can snowball. So if you think about it, some very simple questions. Would you rather hit 1 bad shot or 5? We'd all rather limit it to 1. And that's the impact or the effect of fear and anger on your golf game. And I've got a ton of students all the time who will work in a lesson together, and we'll get them hitting the ball really well on the practice tee. They're just hitting it perfect. They look like they're a scratch golfer they could play on tour. And then once they go to the golf course, they can hardly break 90. And oftentimes that's the mental game. That's where we start to get a little angry, a little fearful, and we let those things kind of stay in our golf game. And so the first step that this psychologist was talking about was just being aware of those things and the negative impacts, because they're not really tangible. As we're standing on the golf course, we don't tangibly see, I can see my grip is the wrong way or whatever, but we can't necessarily see the fear or the anger that's in us that's negatively impacting how we're playing the game. And so what's kind of interesting is that anger is not a primary emotion. What they call it a primary emotion. And so what that means is it's always paired with another emotion. It's always a result of something else. And most of the times, anger is paired with fear. It's a result of fear. And so the two things that this sports psychologist was talking about, the anger and fear hurting your golf game, is actually the two things that hurt your golf game is fear and fear. It's the same thing. It's just how we express it and how it comes out. And what's also interesting is that fear and gratitude, they can't exist in your brain at the same time. There's a book called What Happy People Know, and it's Dr. Don Baker has a quote in there that says, "It's a fact of neurology that the brain cannot be in a state of appreciation and a state of fear at the same time." And so that's kind of interesting that in order to get rid of this fear, that this psychologist was saying how great golfers who are mentally tough, how they overcome fear and anger and kind of limit the damage is that they practice gratitude or gratefulness and appreciation on the golf course. Whether that's focusing on the great golf course that you get to play or the beautiful weather or the playing partners that you're with, if a golfer is able to hit a bad shot, instead of getting angry and letting that fear creep in, focusing on something else, then that fear can't actually exist in their mind and when they play. And one of my favorite passages is 1 John 4:18, which says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. The one who fears is not made perfect in love." And I think about all this kind of in my everyday life, and I've got a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, and there's not a lot of logic in my house right now. And when we have conversations about what we're doing, it can cause quite a bit of anger. If you've had children that age, and you're having conversations with them that are just more often than not completely illogical. And so after I've gone through this seminar and realized how fear and anger is working in my golf game, I've started to notice that the frustration or the anger that I have with my children sometimes when we have illogical conversations is actually fear creeping into my life and allowing fear to drive how I live my life and how I parent and how I do different things. And so working on, I guess God's showing me how to recognize those things, the fear and the anger, and how to limit those things so that they don't affect other people around me. And there's other types of fears as well. My youngest son, he deals with seizures. He'll be 3 at the end of the month, and he's had 4 seizures in his lifetime. And they're often very violent. He stops breathing, he turns blue, his eyes roll back, he foams at the mouth, he shakes uncontrollably, and they're very, very fear-inducing. And luckily, the neurologists, they don't have a lot of answers about why this happens, but they do say, oh, he's going to grow out of it. And they are, even though they're very violent, they are not life-threatening, so we're lucky in that sense. But over the last couple of years, my wife and I, we live with a lot of fear inside of us, just thinking that one of those may happen again. Because I've held my young son in my hands more than once, not being sure how to, being so out of control, not being sure how to stop things, if he's going to be all right, and having to watch him get put into an ambulance and taken off to the hospital and all these tests run on him and everything. And so that's a big element of fear that I've experienced as well, and I've tried to recognize, because after his last 2 episodes, I noticed that I wasn't really a fun person to be around. I noticed that I was letting fear creep in. We'd been to all these doctors, and they assured us that everything was going to be okay, but he's kind of in rare company. They say about 5% of kids experience these seizures, experience one of them, and then half of those experience 2, and half of those experience 3, and half experience 4. So he's in pretty rare company at 4 right now. So we're in this territory where the doctors have told us, well, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And so I noticed kind of coming out of that yes, it's a real fear, but it also kind of affected the way that I loved other people, because I was gripped by this fear and a little bit of anger, to be honest, that I was having to go through this. And really, I wasn't in a very loving state, because I felt like I was in just kind of this survival mode where I was fearful all the time. And so then it kind of comes back to 1 Corinthians 9, where Pastor Ashley was talking about, and Paul was talking about how to train your body like an athlete in the same way you do your faith. And I tried to pick out just one verse in the Bible that talked about gratitude and thankfulness, but there were just too many to do, so you can go look those up. But they're all over the Bible. I'm sure you're aware that God says to give thanks, to count your blessings, to have gratitude. And I used to ignore those things, just kind of skim over those, and maybe in my prayers say, God, thank you for everything you've done, move on to my actual prayer requests. But then, this passage about there's no fear in love, having fear present in my life, it limits my ability to love other people. And so realizing that this gratitude and fear can exist at the same time, I've started practicing this daily gratitude, just being aware of the good things that are happening in life. And that's kind of like what I was talking about happens on the golf course. If you're able to refocus and focus on gratitude and thankfulness, that's one of the ways that me personally, God's showing me how to train my faith for fear and anger, to eliminate those things from my life, is to notice the signs and to prepare myself so that I'm not hurt or I'm not affecting other people by the fear and the anger that's in my life, that I'm not allowing that to affect the love that I can give to other people. And so one of the things that Pastor Ashley also talked about was Hebrews 12, 1 through 2, and this is one of my favorite passages. It says, therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, which, just kind of a side note, that's what's interesting about that cloud of witnesses is that in the Old Testament, God often spoke through a cloud. And so this cloud is the cloud of witnesses is the people around us that speak God's voice into your life. So because of that, let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so as I think about the fear and the anger, and I think everyone experiences fear and anger in some ways, allowing us to strip off those things. And my men's group is huge in helping me identify those things in my life so that I can redirect and kind of focus on the gratitude in my life so that I'm not gripped by fear and that I'm able to love fully the way God's called us to love fully. But I think that having people around you and practicing the spiritual discipline of daily gratitude is one way that we can strip off that fear. Because a lot of us, I think, like to act like we don't have fear. That doesn't affect us. You know, we're guys, so we don't talk about fear. There's anger, but we don't even realize that that's kind of the same thing. But another one of my favorite passages is the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself in love in Galatians 5:6. And so as I think about, you know, whether it's my golf game, the things that I'm doing to hit a good golf shot, those obviously matter, but they're not sustainable if I'm not in a good mental state. If I'm gripped by fear and anger, you know, I may hit one good golf shot, but then the bad will come. And so if I'm allowing the fear of whatever it is to grip myself, then I'm not able to have this sustainable type of love, and I'm not able to love others fully because of the fear and the anger that's in my life. And so really the big things that, kind of to summarize what God's been teaching me, is to how to recognize anger and love in my life, to practice daily gratitude as a spiritual discipline so that I can love others well. And just the fact that even science knows that having gratitude and appreciation and thankfulness in your life is going to eliminate those fear and anger from your life. It's just how it works. And so even if you think about, you know, I think about our political climate, and I'm not a very political person, but think about that, you know, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever it is. What is that side that kind of makes you a little angry, right? It's easy to just say, like, those people are evil because they make me angry, because they look at the world differently than I do. But there was something that happened, I think it was in the 2000s, I tried looking up the video, but I couldn't find it, but in, I think, the 2016, maybe before that, presidential election, where there was a debate, and the person on the debate stage said, "Now, would you say something kind about your opponent?" And there was this really awkward back and forth where they really weren't able to do it because there's this all this fear and anger about the other side. And I wish we could do that more often. We could say something positive about the people who make us angry, and we don't even realize that the anger that we feel towards them is actually fear of them. And if we can see the good and the positive and express gratitude and thanksgiving for the people and the situations that make us angry and really make us fearful, then that can really transform how you live your faith and how you love out others around you. So that's about the end of my time. I've got some discussion questions for you up here for your groups. Really, what makes you angry? What's the fear behind that emotion? What else might be holding you back from loving others fully? And then what are you grateful for? So kind of starting the spiritual discipline of daily gratitude and counting your blessings and seeing what are the good things that are going on in your life so that the fear and the anger can't exist in your brain any longer. Sound good? All right. Well, thanks for having me, and we'll see you around.